Hi, welcome to my retirement roadmap. We are moving along in the series of videos about legal documents, or probably better known as estate planning. We will now talk about revocable living trusts and pour over wills. This to me is the most important part of what I'm trying to share here. And that's if we go back to the objectives of what I was kind of hoping to do with this series of videos is if you don't already have a revocable living trust, that you would consider getting one. Okay. And this is especially true if you have what's called real property or real estate. So let's say you have a residence this is your home. That if you do have a home, I think it's a good idea, a very good idea actually, to have a revocable trust. That's real estate, and that makes things a lot easier for someone who's trying to handle your estate after you pass, or even when you're still alive. If you cannot act for yourself, it makes it a lot easier for your successor trustees to handle matters while you are still alive. And that's what why they call it living. And also, I like to make this point. Um, I'm not quite sure how accurate it is, but I think this makes perfect sense. Is these revocable trusts are one of the kindest things that you can do for yourself. If you do become incapacitated, these things can just make life a lot easier for you while you are incapacitated and can't take care of things for yourself. So in other words, this thing can do be very helpful for you, especially when it comes to your real property or real estate. And basically we're talking about homes here, as opposed to some people have investment real estate, like rental units and stuff like that. That's outside of the scope of what we're talking about here. Okay. The other thing, while we're talking about trusts, there's another part I want to point out. Because when we think of trusts, when we hear such and such got a trust or something like that, typically we're not talking about a revocable trust. There's much more complex planning that goes on with trusts. And I know when I was going through my training for the certified financial planner, which I am not a certified financial planner, by the way, but I did go through the education, the training, took the exam and passed, etc. But man, you learn about all these trusts, CRATs, just a bunch of different trusts. A lot of them are designed to actually manage your affairs after you've passed away, and those are irrevocable trusts. So you put them in place, and you can't change them. Okay, but that's completely out of the scope of what we're talking about today. But that's typically what people think, and they say, "I don't need a trust. I don't have a fancy of an estate." But this is different. Revocable living trust, revocable meaning you can make changes, and you're in there. This is yours. This is your. It's as opposed to the others. The other stuff, if you need that, if you come from a blended family, for example, where there's stepchildren or etc. Or second, third marriage, whatever, those types of marriages, then you really should be talking to an estate planning attorney to make sure all that stuff is covered correctly. And all that's I like the analogy. It's like how you can control all that stuff from the grave. That's out of scope here. I'll circle back to, we're just talking about a revocable trust, or a revocable living trust is what we're talking about here. Okay? And these are, as with the others, the power of attorneys and wills, etc., these are drafted at the state level, okay, by state law. This revocable living trust it's generally honored across states. That typically is not an issue, okay? Whereas sometimes with the wills and the advanced healthcare directives, those things can be a little stickier, that if you're residing in a state, but the power of attorney is from a different state, that can get things a little bit tricky. These things, the living trust, those are, my understanding, not a lawyer again, but they are honored across states. A big thing, this is what sealed the deal for me personally, okay? This avoids probate. Okay, now let's just be clear here. I'm in the state of California. Jeff and I, we own two different properties, okay, that we have. We have two, a home in the Northern Bay, and we have this, what do you call it, slab of unimproved real estate. What a lot, you know. So we have these, and we have those set up, and those are perfect candidates for going into a revocable trust. Okay. These things are also, this revocable trust is also, you could consider pretty private, as opposed to if you only have a will and you pass away, it goes through probate, and all that information is public. It just is. I mean, if you're one of those people that loves to know everybody else's business, you can find it. It's out there. I think I hope I don't get this wrong, but I think it was Aretha Franklin passed away, and all that information became public. So that's one thing I like about this. It is private. Okay, and I've listened to experts, lawyers talk about giving an analogy of what a trust, this revocable trust, is like, and one said it's like a picnic basket. So you have this basket, and you put things inside of it, and that's also called funding. The other thing is a wagon. And another attorney talks about it. It's like a wagon. So you put stuff inside of the wagon, and that's the real estate. Typically, it's your homes. They go in there. And I'll give you an example. Okay, this is another thing that seals it. When I talk about living, you're alive. You're still alive, and you've got this revocable trust. This makes things easier because if you, for example, let's say you're single, your spouse has passed away, you're on your own, you've got this house, you end up getting into a situation where you can't handle things for yourself, okay? Because if your house is inside of this trust, that provides that your successor trustee can take care of that. It doesn't have, you don't have to go to court and get this all, say, I need to sell this house or whatever. So it's inside of this revocable living trust. It just makes things so much simpler. Okay? And I'm going to also use this, talk about this as well, is if you have other property in other states. Okay? So let's say you have property in the state of California, and you have property in the state of Arizona, just for example purposes. So you pass away, you're gone. And your spouse is gone as well. So it's just, this is all. So then the person who's handling all these matters, okay, this stuff, if the property is not inside of a trust, this revocable trust, they have to probate those properties. And first of all, they're going to have to deal with California. California has its probate laws, and to be completely transparent, I think California is known as one of the most expensive states to go through probate, right? There are probably others. I know there's states that are very, very probate friendly. It's much less expensive, much easier. But California is not one of those. But even for states that say they're easy, okay, even if they're easy with probate, it's still public information that the executor, if it's just a will, they need to go through the probate process. And back to my talking about two different states, they have to do it in both states. So they'd have to go, they have to deal with the California probate in California, and then this again, if it's just a will, it's not in a trust. So they have to deal with California for one property, and then they have to go to Arizona to talk about the other property. It gets expensive. It's very difficult for a person, okay, to handle that. So anyway, that's why I really like the revocable living trust. The other thing it's very good about the trust, okay, is you can give some specifics of how you want the things to be handled in the trust to your successor trustee. And that's where pets come in place. And I really, I think that is really important, to where we can give special directions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the last video. But this trust is very good. Again, if you don't have a trust, if you're one of these people that thinks I don't need a trust, but you have real estate, I think you need to reconsider that. And we'll also talk about a little later about how these things don't have to be super expensive. If your situation is simple, you can do this thing relatively easily and inexpensively. So there's the other part of this revocable living trust, because when you do this, when you put your estate documents together and you have a trust, what happens is you also have a pour over will. And what's this? What's the deal with the pour over will? Okay, so what happens is, I mean, all our real estate's in the trust. We've done what we're supposed to do, but we have other assets. For example, Jeff and myself, we have this motorhome, and he assures me that this motorhome is still worth a lot of money. So I'm hoping he's correct, because I know the RV market seems to be in decline right now. But I mean, then I'm thinking about, well, what about our successor trustee who has to deal with this? Because again, we you know we go back to the very beginning when I said we're in a cruise ship. Cruise ship goes down, we're toast, we're done, and then we're watching the successor trustee handle all this. And what happens is there's this pour over will. The trustee will have to take that uh, and say, hey, listen, we got this motorhome, because they didn't put the motorhome inside the trust, which typically you don't put vehicles in the trust. I guess you can, but some states, it just depends on how the states want to deal with all that. But anyway, so ours is not. So what would happen is this pour over will. That's our biggest asset that we have. That's not inside of our retirement accounts and our real estate. So then our successor trustee goes in, has to go to court, because this is a will, it's a pour over will. And the judge, whoever makes this decision in the courts, they say, okay, we're fine. You can go ahead and take that motor home. And then there's a few pieces of art, some things like that. Just pour all that, throw it into the trust. It all goes in. So the will just puts it all in there. And then the successor trustee, it just makes things so much easier for them to handle. That I just wanted to state there, just give you a little bit more information about the revocable living trust. And then once we get to the very end, I'm going to wrap all this stuff. The last video, I'm going to wrap all this stuff and go walk through our scenario. Thanks. And I'll catch up with you in the next video, where we're going to talk about qualified retirement accounts and then at the conclusion. See you there.